Hello, everyone. I'm Joanna Smith Ramani with the Aspen Financial Security Program. And today is a very exciting day for me as an interviewer and you all as listeners, because we have two leaders in community from around the country, but who are also members of our community advisory group. Rosazlia Grillier, she has many, many different affiliations, board member, leaders with nonprofit, community leader. You can read all about her on our website. And Victor Inuk Gavilanes, who is also a community advisory group member, as I mentioned, but has done tons of work in environmental justice and advocacy. He currently is on the North Water Coalition. And again, the contributions of these two folks is frankly what keeps our country and our communities moving. So please read more about them after this conversation. But this conversation is part of our series on how do we understand climate events, climate change, and household financial security. And I'm so excited about this because we have yet in our series to really dig deep with community leaders who are looking at the advocacy, the justice issues, and are really seeing the day-to-day impacts for families of how climate events, how climate activities, how all of those things aren't just, oh, a thing that happened over there or a thing from last week, but like part of daily lives. Is that right, Miss Rose and Victor?
Absolutely.
It definitely is.
And Victor, I'd love for you to kick us off here. I will warn the audience that I only have 15 minutes with two people that I could talk for half a day with on this issue. But I want to get some highlights from them of what they're seeing on the ground, why they're prioritizing this intersectional issue of weather, climate, and financial security, and what's giving them hope and excitement that we can do something big and impactful, and that leads to better outcomes in our communities. But Victor, let me start with you. Again, you have a past that includes environmental justice and environmental advocacy, and you have parts in the middle of your career that also have labor movements and workers' rights and all kinds of other community organizing. And how did this fall back on your radar again?
Well, I mean,
Or maybe you never left.
well, I can say I took a break for the past year or so, but it's still a consistent thing that I'm being reminded of every single day. Of course, the weather is every day, right? Our climate is all the time, so it's like um we're seeing the changes of weather from one day to the next. I mean, what was it? Just the other day was like 60, 70 degrees. Next day was like 30, 20. Even today, with it being warm, I worry about how tomorrow's going to be.
Yeah.
But for me, what brings me like really to the forefront is the impacts. What I've directly been impacted to. I'm a person who's, I suffer from asthma. Here in the city of Newark, we have a high, rate of people who suffer from asthma due to air pollutions. We have a lot of industry down here that causes a lot of that air pollution, still that exists here in the city of Newark. Um, Not just that, but also, in one of the areas, the eastward ironbound section of Newark, where I am, I got a lot of friends and family still in the area. So I'm often going around there. And whenever we, experience a heavy rain or consistent rain, there is significant amounts of flooding in the area. Um, and then the humidity that picks up, what I'm saying, creating like this heat island effect, what I'm saying? So there's like, it's like, again, it's a consistent reminder of what's going on in our environment, what's going on with our health. So it's something that I just feel like, even though I've kind of leaned back on a lot of the heavy work and the groundwork, I have found other ways to kind of get involved in how I could still be uh, a positive role model and still give a positive impact while trying to progress myself with my career.
Well, and thank you so much for that. Ms. Rose, I wonder for you how similar to, similar or different, but to Victor's story of how climate has, shifted shape. I don't even know. I'm like, feel like I'm in a Marvel movie, but how has it formed itself into the front of the other kind of advocacy and leadership work you're doing around not just families surviving, but families thriving, right? And really getting to live the full prosperous lives they all deserve.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joanna. So everything Victor said. And because I work citywide, statewide, and nationally, I can safely say that across the country, parents, families, and communities uh, are really at the forefront of advocating for these very issues on a number of levels. And I can say firsthand that families in financially challenged communities for many years have felt the direct environmental and financial devastations on many levels. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to contend with here. But more often, these hardships that they're dealing with while they're advocating for the adequate change that they need to see to even survive themselves.
Mm,
And I don't want to start a climate change debate, but I know the anguish, loss, and separation and disbursement that even my family faced during Katrina, and I'm
Yeah.
sure other folks have faced during other national disasters. And we could blame it on the sunshine or the boogie, but we all know what the real culprit is. So,
Well, I appreciate so much what you're saying because it's an important reminder that even though we're talking about it now as Aspen FSP and folks around the country, such important historical point that communities that we have disinvested in, that there's not been justice for centuries, really, and most certainly decades, right? Um, have been feeling the impact of different kinds of climate issues forever, either the high cost of energy because of the way the buildings they were built were in, or as Victor brought up, all kinds of toxins and pollutants in our air that leads certain communities to have asthma more than others. It's, nothing physically wrong with those folks. It's actually an environment that they have been living in for some time now that we're now almost catching up with, as saying, okay, we actually need to deal with these things at the same time. Um, I'm wondering, Ms. Rose, you said parents have been, and the leadership work you've done has been on the forefront of all of this. What is the work that you've been doing, and what are kind of the areas of priorities for you?
and some people think this is off point, but it absolutely isn't. Let's talk a little bit about energy burdens.
Yeah, let's
mm,
please.
So many families face, and families really shouldn't have to choose whether they're going to eat or heat.
Yeah,
They really shouldn't have to choose between medicine or lights or any of the utilities. And since COVID, um, there was a small bit of relief, and parents on the ground fought for those moratoriums to continue on that gave some utility relief along the way. But then, of course, that ran out. But then inflation came. And
yeah,
mm,
so, even though there was a tiny bit of relief, it catapulted people back into the same burdens, if not worse. And so, when you think about all these issues that we could lift around this, whether it be with climate, whether it be with poverty, whether it be with the communities that have been deprived of the
mm,
resources and all of those things, they are all intersecting. They
mm,
are all connected. And the more that we start to think about that common denominator is usually the barriers and the things that are put in place for a certain group of people. And as a result of that, those folks are at the forefront of this work because it's not about a paycheck for them, it is about survival.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Victor. Um, for you, what have been the intersectional priorities or the priorities, and maybe it's been parallel to what Ms. Rose has been describing, but what I appreciate so much about what you just said, Ms. Rose, too, is we actually have some things that worked. We know some things in very recent history, right? Just from the 2020 to 2022 around COVID, that really helped families, that really helped manage some of the climate exposure. So it's not like we're starting from scratch here about how to help and what to do. But I'm curious, Victor, what's on your mind in terms of priorities there as it relates to the impact of climate on household financial security and thriving?
Well, I mean, priority first, I think first and foremost is the continuation of educating our communities, bringing awareness about the impacts of climate change, not just the impacts of climate change, but how are these impacts happening? Why they're still happening? Why they're happening, actually, right? I think some of the things that I feel like, and I'm not trying to put this on schools at all, but some of the things I have heard students in like high schools speak about climate change, like they reference a lot of big things, but old things that happen, never things that are currently going on right now. Like, when we address something that's happening right now, we get into that critical thinking, right? And when you allow community to get into the critical thinking about something that's presently happening, you come up with some really interesting strategies, possibly solutions to addressing these certain things, or to curb what's happening. I think the approach, you know what I'm saying? The approach is important. When we're discussing around climate change, it providing a voice, a space at the table for community, and thinking about how leaders should, really focus on, when I mention leaders, I don't mention like folks like myself or Miss Rose. It's not just us. When I mention leaders, I also think about industry. I think about government. I think about civil society organizations, nonprofits, anything that's deeply rooted in community, but at the same time, it's deeply rooted in in what's happening in the decision making in our country, right? Urban communities are by far, if not the most, one of the most vulnerable to climate change, and to the impacts of what we're seeing. And I think the approach of the discussion of having leaders from all levels at the table talking about things, it allows for, how can I say, it allows for the transparency above everything, the inclusion above everything. It allows for, for everyone to be on that same page. And I think that, again, I haven't been in the work as deeply as much in the past year or so, but having the discussion, hearing about these discussions, hearing Aspen talking about these things, it's a consistent reminder that we need to consistently be having. We have to talk about it more. We have to talk about it more. It has to be in our forefront thought. You know what I'm saying? Shoot, we need ads on TV. We need social media pumping out there, and not talking about the conspiracy aspect of it, but talking about the how can I say, let's not talk about the point the finger aspect. Let's talk about how can we change, how can we curb certain things happening. I feel like we've reached the point, and I think just recently I read an article that talked about climate scientists feel like we've reached the point of no return. I don't feel like we've reached the point of no return. I just feel like we all just really need to work together in accordance, not just in America, but around the world, in really bringing that change that we need to see in order to die down a lot of the climate impacts happening. Now, I hope I answered the question in the best way.
It's so, I mean, it is certainly how we work at Aspen, but what you were saying is so important about the need for so many different kinds of leaders to, one, accept that this is a problem and a critical thing to solve for, to two, understand their role. Like, I can't do things an energy company can do. I also can't do things that you and Miss Rose can do, right? I have things I can do. So what is my obligation, responsibility, part of this? Like, what's my opportunity, to do something bigger here? And then the third part of what I hear you say is that we can't also do it. Not only can I not do what other people can do, this has to be collaborative. Like, there's no other way around it. And that will get us to a better place. Those are beautiful, really thoughtful, important, and right words. Ms. Rose, let me let you close us out here. What brings you kind of optimism and hope about this, or a solution, a set of leaders, a thing you're working on, whatever it is? But let's leave our viewers with the thing that says, we're going to do what Victor said, and we're not going to think this is over. We know there's a place to go.
Yeah, since you guys have opened the bottle, let me pour out a little of the secret sauce.
Please.
So collaboration is so important, but in real partnership, not in a hierarchy, because we know that most of the issues, the problems are rooted in systems and policies that need reform, that
Yeah.
need change, that need to be brought up to date. What worked in 1920 can't possibly work effectively now. And so in thinking about that, each state has to identify who their stakeholders are and who the players are at the table that could contribute to this climate and energy crisis in a positive way. But I'll just give you an example. In Illinois, Kofi Community Organizing and Family Issues, which is one of the organizations that I'm a part of, uh, partner with NCLC, which is the National Consumer Law Consortium, or I might be butchering the acronyms, but anyway, we worked together to push to extend the moratorium around utility disconnections, but we went even further to have an expert witness with the data, because we know data is important, but data means nothing other than numbers if you don't have those real life stories that match and coincide with what the data is proving. And so we had an expert witness with data, we had an expert witness with lived experience, and they came before the ICC and presented our 5-tier proposal on reforms. And I'm sure it's historical in Illinois, but they accepted our reforms, and beginning in October of this year, those things will go into place. Well, to some people, that might be yada, 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 but to the folks on the ground, this is massive change and help for them when they're trying to pay their utility bills and live and move forward in a human way. So we have to bring human back to these conversations, and everyone has to really think about it and identify something and ask themselves a question. What can I do? Not
Mhm.
what can everybody else do? Get that mirror, put it right in front of you. What can I do to be a positive? It doesn't have to be a big astronomical thing. You don't have to have a million letters behind your name. But what can I do? Something simple that I can do to contribute to the change for the better. And once we start to ask ourselves that question and identify all the amazing gifts and talents that are out here, I'm like, Victor, I believe it can happen.
That's such a great success story. Thank you for sharing that and just for sharing what was at the heart of what made it real and possible. Um, I'm sad we have to go, viewers, friends, people that care about these issues. But I just want to say goodbye and thank you to Miss Rose and Victor, and really thank them deeply for their participation in our community advisory group and all the contributions they make to our work, to the work into their communities, to the work truly in the country. And enjoy the rest of our series on how to really start digging into these meaty, substantive, difficult but solvable issues around financial security and climate. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you. I
you.
appreciate it. Bless.